My name is Jonas, and I am super happy to be here with you guys today to talk about profit marketing and the future of growing global e-commerce. And I would like to start off to say big welcome to Roshita from Google. So please make a short introduction about yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Rajita, and I am a senior international growth consultant with Google in the Global Business Solutions team. I lead the Northern Europe cluster for the International Growth Agency program in EMEA to enable media agencies in being trusted and effective partners in supporting businesses to expand globally. I come with experience of about 7 years in the media industry. I worked in Google India for about 5 years and moved to Ireland 3 years ago, and have worked across large clients, e-commerce brands, and creative agencies. So I have a mix of global experience across the two offices.
Super happy to have you here, and it's really nice to have you with a truly global experience. I've seen a lot during those last 7 years, right? So let's get to it, because we have a lot of great content, and me and Roshita really would like to share as much as possible today, and also bring you clear guidance and even sharing some bonus content that you can actually take yourself just straight off the bat and start experimenting and think about as well. So make sure that you stay to them, because you will have a lot of great things in the end to follow up on. So let's see here. So we will talk about profit marketing, and I will take that part, and I will also address the question about how do you pick your highest potential market, depending on what type of business you are in. And then Roshita, you will talk a lot about operational excellence and what that will look like. Is it any specific that you would like to address on your part of the talk?
Yes, absolutely. I think the key theme that I would be covering is that, of course, we have a lot of resources where we can extract data from in terms of, okay, what does good localization look like? What does good customer experience look like? How do you talk about logistics? How do you think about payments in the global market? But I think the one thing that's really important is that we also need to look beyond the obvious data. And we also need to look beyond data. Localization is a lot more than just translation. It's about the language. It's about the culture nuances that you want to think about. And that's where you want to not just look at data blindly, but you also want to consider those aspects of subjectiveness which occur when you are trying to move global, or when you're trying to expand to a country you don't know much about. And I'm going to cover a lot of examples where brands have done this right, but also where brands have made some mistakes and been able to learn from them. And we extract those learnings as Google to drive operational excellence as a part of the Global Business Solutions team, and design the customer journey for our users to make sure that they're setting up themselves for success in an international market.
Yeah, and then in the end we will wrap it up with a Q&A session and talk more about like the unique collaboration we have and how we bring this to our clients, and like I mentioned, some bonus content in the end. So that's the agenda. So what do we see in the future really? If we look at the big picture, we really see 3 big trends that is a challenge for anybody who has an online store, e-commerce, or anything that is valuable in terms of happening on a site, for example. And that is really the competence within this space is getting harder and harder to find. We see that product margins pretty much doesn't matter what you're selling, it is getting pushed based on competition and the globalization as well. And then we also see that the trend is also that the cost for marketing is going up. But that doesn't mean you can still be profitable, because it's about doing smart decision and be really efficient with the channels that you are using. So these 3 forces is something that we from Keywordio really specialize on solving, and specifically how to be smart with marketing. That is really our core specialty within this space. So what does the real funnel look like? And there is a lot of different funnels. You're probably seen a lot of different versions of it, but this is a really interesting study that just came out from Google, and it's done based on 310 different journeys across a lot of different categories. And looking from what's the trigger point where consumer actually thinks I'm about to buy this, all the way down to the purchase. And the conclusions from this study is actually that it is a mess, right? It is really hard to say this is what happened. So saying yes, that this is what we do in the awareness days, this is consideration, and this is purchase, it is not that simple. So this is the reality that we live in, and this is something as for us in marketing, it's something that we need to just be aware of. And I really recommend every one of you to look up both the large study that is done, that is called Decoding Decision in the messy middle of purchase behavior, and also look at your country specific versions of this. So you can look at the Swedish version if you have a site based in Sweden, because there are some local nuances that is always important to be aware of. So I really recommend that. But we can all conclude that a simple funnel is not really the truth. And today, in terms of profit marketing, I won't talk about branding. I am not here to speak about how you should work on building a brand and making people come back. I will focus on the performance marketing side. And actually taking performance from performance to profit and then to scale, and hand over to Rishita and more focus on the operational part. And what I'm really excited in your part of the talk is that really bring it into the details about how do you design a good, for example, support service that really helps the customer and depending on what countries you're launching into. So this is what we will focus on today. So first, what segment are you in? I think this is a very important question to ask yourself. Like, what business are you in? So if you look at the top row here, if you're selling sort of direct to consumer, or you go straight from your product lines to selling your products, you have a couple of different versions. And we start looking into the Gymshark segment. This is a amazing company that design gym clothes, sell them direct to consumers in their own channels. Typically average order value is below 500 euros. Of course, they need to have a complete different think about how they run efficient customer acquisition and marketing compared to Netflix, which is a pure subscription business. And of course, there are some e-commerce companies that are almost like a subscription business. And of course, understanding where you are in that range. And for example, I hear a lot, yeah, we should focus on lifetime value. Yeah, it's depending on what segment you are in this part. Because if you go down to the retailer part, where you actually sell other consumer brands, or you're a hybrid, you sell your own products and you mix them up with other brands as well. Like Walmart is a huge example of this. Also, probably average order value below 500 euros. IKEA, well, you probably buy a sofa, it's not that often. Of course, a lifetime value discussion there, yes, in the long term, but many times there's going to be very few companies that really need to, for example, build a complete automation, get lifetime value all the way into Google Ads and see how the budget is distributed based on that. Some customers need to do it, but it's definitely not for everyone, and it's based on your business model, and really understand what segment you're in before you start saying that, oh, we should go for lifetime value, for example. So that is really important. Then understanding what's the top target here. Is it top line revenue growth, or is it bottom line profit? And of course, knowing your unit economics takes that up on a channel level and then all the way up to the company level, and be really efficient about how to do this, and make sure that it goes all the way down to the performance marketing side, or the profit marketing discussion. And if you look at the part where I see a lot of discussions on the meetings I join with companies that work with a global approach, have as many markets, and it's complex. So if we look at the C level and how they communicate to like e-com manager or maybe CMO, and all the way down to e-commerce manager, performance team, or agencies, I see quite often there is a disconnect between these different layers, and of course there's different reasons for it. But for example, if you look at top level like P&L report, typically look at year over year, month over month. You have a high level understanding of marketing spend, new users, returning users. And then when it comes down to channel economics, it's more maybe Google Analytics, you have some BI tools in there, and then going all the way down to the unit economics in the channel itself. Like, for example, let's take Google Shopping for an example. It is very important that everybody in the company is aligned and understand how that works from top to bottom, because otherwise it creates frictions and different priorities, and that is a very important thing that I see a lot is creating quite a lot of friction. So how do you actually do that? And I think that it doesn't have to be the most complex solution to it. Just doing simple correlation analysis, looking at marketing spend versus gross revenue, aligning on that, and just be aligned on, okay, what is actually happening when we are increasing the spend, and doing these kind of high level analysis and make sure that everybody is aligned on the behaviors here. Then looking into the different measurement systems. So our P&L report, what's the correlation between the truth and Google Analytics, for example? Do we have plus minus 5% or where are we? Just to make sure that, once again, everybody understands this. And then take Google Analytics and then go into a channel. So for example, if you see that you have a difference between Facebook and Google Analytics reporting of 300%, yeah, then you can of course do a really big project on attribution, but maybe it's not that what you need. You just need to be aware of it and know that, okay, this is how we run it, this is how it works, and this is the data we have currently. But just that everyone are aware of where we are in this is very important. And then of course you can talk about the overlap effect between different channels and what you're doing. And also talk about, well, what's the time effect, for example, if you're spending on shopping, search ads, or social, like what's the delayed effect on this? And of course this is more of a complex discussion, but that is also something that is important to at least assess and see how that should be done based on where you are in the segment matrix and your business model. So typically the way we do it is to do these attribution growth workshops where we really line out and take data from the P&L report, correlate that to the measurement system that you have in place, and then take it all the way into the channel, so you actually have one view of everything. And just having this workshop with all levels is very helpful and something that always generates new questions and understanding that will reduce friction in the future and make you more efficient as a company. So when you go all the way down to the setting the ROAS targets, you can take the QR code here and you can just go into this sheet yourself and look at it after the call. But this is just how you set ROAS targets for Google Ads based on product margins. So adding your VAT, understanding your product cost, and of course doing this at scale. Of course it should be automated and implemented straight into Google Ads or in the feed, for example. But this is also very it's a lot of companies that doesn't look at it from this perspective. So why can your ROAS be too high, for example? If you have A and B version here. So let's say that you have A, you have an impression share of 60%. Let's say you have a revenue of 100,000. You have a return on ad spend of 10. It means you spend 10,000 in ads. And you have, if you're just looking at what we have in revenue and what you remove the cost for the channel, the result, of course, it's not P&L result, but it's result from the channel. So that's 90,000 left after that. But let's say that you can actually increase the impression share and actually reduce the ROAS. If you still have the profit margins to run a ROAS of 7 and still be profitable, then you can actually make more money on this. And I think this is also so important to look at the different cases here, because it's also one thing that I hear is that, yeah, the ROAS is great, it's so high, right? But many times it's actually worth, okay, we can actually reduce the ROAS and increase the result here with 43% just by this example. So understanding your profit margins in the unit economics and connect that into the channel is something that is very important and should be continuously monitored. So if we take shopping, for example, then it's also about setting the targets, and based on the segment that you have, it's also important to segment out different assortments. So if you're selling like shoes and you're selling dresses and you're selling jeans, maybe it's more important to do a category analysis and look where you have your profit margins, for example. But if you have a lot of different other services, maybe you need to split them out differently, or maybe you need to go as detailed as into a product level analysis. And for example, if you have an assortment where you know that you have low margins on, of course, cutting away them, for example, is important. But it could also be that it's just the low average order value on some products. Maybe they should just be a cutaway, and they should only be offered as bundles, for example, just to make it possible to run this in a profitable way. So for you guys who thought it would say AI will solve everything, it's maybe not the case, because it's a lot of like simple manual rules, and also work a lot with the assortment that is really important here in the beginning as well, to sort out what is key in the assortment. And then when it comes to run the analysis, for example, if you have each dot here is a product, and the size of the product is revenue, and then you have the benchmark product price, so you see how you price your product compared to your competition, and you map that out versus return on ad spend. Then you can typically see in a detailed assortment analysis that here in the B segment we have a really good price compared to the market. We still have a low return on ad spend. There's something wrong here, because if we have a good price, we have a good product, there's just something wrong. Why are we not profitable here? We need to work on this area, for example. The C segment, we still have a great price compared to the competition. We have a good ROAS, but there's something we can probably do more here to grow faster. And then in the A segment, we have a high price, but we still have a good ROAS. So there's something here that is really interesting as well, because maybe there's something that makes the consumer to buy from you anyway if your price is high, right? Which is good. So doing this and keep evaluating this at different levels to see, okay, when we increase and say filter out everything where we have revenue of at least $1,000, then of course we see, oh, everyone in the A segment, they disappeared. So the volume is actually in C now. And if we increase it even more to say revenue about 10,000, yeah, then we see even more in the C segment. So that's where we have the big chunk where we need to work and focus. And we have no products left in the A segment. So understand where you are as a customer, if you are the Gymsharks, retailers, or where you are, and combining that in with a really detailed unit economics and assortment. That is really the key to run this profitable at scale. So then when it comes to the next question, go global. So how do you pick your next market? And many times I see that this is done based on gut feeling. We should go to Germany. We should go to France. And of course, there's a lot of questions here. You can ask about barrier to entry. It's so much easier to go in here. And this is something that, yeah, Ruchita, I guess you've seen this a lot as well, but there's a lot of gut feeling in this space a lot of times.
Absolutely. I think there's gut feeling, there is curiosity of, okay, is that market going to be interesting for me? From the outside, you look at the size and you decide that that's where my customers lie. And there's also a lot of added, I'd say, context that you have from either competitor brands who are already doing it. And that's how globalization has become what it is now, because you see brands going global and you want to do the same. And that's completely great. I love the idea of being curious about doing this. But you have to make sure that you layer your curiosity and your gut feeling with solid data and backing, so that you're making an informed decision and taking an informed risk.
Yeah, and also the resources. Like even the largest companies in the world doesn't have the resources to go everywhere, right? So how do you actually take these different segments and turn this into data then? Because the answer you would like to have is to have a score. Let's say that these are the countries you would like to go in. And building this score based on just your business model. What segment you are in, what assortment do you have, what's your market, what's the need for the products, what the consumer behavior look in these different countries. And if you would have the score to say, well, Holland has the score 89 compared to Ireland 12, then it is a lot easier to prioritize, right? And this is how we do this together with Google. We pull a lot of data in terms of population and demographics. We also pull a lot of search data to understand the consumer behavior and the actual demand for our customers' products. We also do assessments of the barrier to entry. And we also look at, for example, if you have an influencer market-driven strategy, then of course social is an important part to know how important that is in that country, for example. And then we adjust this and we do the workshop together with all the different layers, C-level, all the way down to agencies and performance marketing teams, to really put this score into a discussion. And of course, if your go-to-market is heavily dependent on paid search, then the beta parameter here will be higher for your company, right? So making this scoring function based on what you see, and then take the discussion based on the score to really back up decision on how do you go forward, how do you launch, how do you grow that market, and then how do you scale that, or actually turn it just this is profit, now it's focusing on profit for this market. And this is really fun to do this workshop, because it's when there is a lot of gut feeling in the room from the beginning, people typically come out with some new aspects and insights from these globalization workshops. And of course then building the game plan to actually launch, grow, and then scale, and then improving that all the time is something that I see on the most successful companies. They are really efficient on running this. So with that, I'm hand over to your part of the presentation, Rashida.
Thank you so much, Jonas. This was so interesting, and I completely agree that profit marketing is not something you gain over a single day, but it's going to be a journey, and we'll make sure your journey is worthwhile. What I'm going to really talk about today is how do you drive that operational excellence that you need when you're trying to think of globalization, when you're trying to think of moving into a new market and you've decided what market is going to be like. We all have noticed that COVID-19 has really disrupted the global economy, the consumer behaviors and businesses around the world. And yet, at the same time, activities such as online shopping have actually doubled. And despite last year's challenges, digital has opened up global growth opportunities for many retailers like yours. And in fact, cross-border e-commerce has accelerated by more than 21%. What does it mean? It means operational excellence is now more important than ever. And if you look at the customer journey on how do we unlock these revenue opportunities across the entire funnel, we all understand it goes away right from the top on awareness to bringing down retention to your customers. And that brings in stronger brand loyalty, digital influence, and profitability. The 4 areas of revenue unlocking across this journey when we think about operations is localization, payments, customer experience, and logistics. And I'm going to deep dive into each of these with some solid examples and ideas of how the countries might be similar to one another, but also how continents could be very different from each other. So you have to take those nuances into account. Coming into localization, firstly, I particularly love this quote by Anthony, which says, translation is not a matter of words only. It is a matter of making intelligible a whole culture. we define localization to be much more than translation. It is a combination of essentially 4 key pillars that we think about: language, culture, people, and location. And the brands who are able to work on a combination of these 4 buckets into their creatives are seen to be more successful and also seen to be going global while staying local. There are implications here on product design or marketing messaging, on your ad creatives, and it becomes really important that you try to look beyond just standard translations when you think about localization. And why does it matter? What we've really learned over the last couple of years when we've talked to our customers, when we've done these surveys via Euromonitor, is that 72% of consumers spend most of their time on websites in their own language. And 82% of the shoppers are more likely to buy if the promotional material is in their own language. 56% of people also say that their ability to obtain information in their own language is more important than price. So it's really important that you are customizing for the consumer in the language that they really prefer. By preference here, I also mean that they're going to abandon the cart, leave the website, increase your bounce rate if the language is not something of their own preference. And let's look at this data. Very interestingly, I'm going to pick up specifically Germany and Brazil as examples. So if you notice Germany, you would notice that the English proficiency in the country is actually very high. 63% of the people are proficient in speaking and reading English. But what you do notice when you deep dive into the query share in terms of their search terms, 89% of them only search in German. So despite of the high English proficiency, the query share in their local language is very high. Very similar thing for Brazil, where the proficiency of English is very high, up to 70%, but the query share continues to be in Portuguese, which means that do not just look at the proficiency of a particular language in the market, but do deep dive into their query share, into their search terms. How are people searching? What type of websites are they spending time on? To really validate your stance that you need to be thinking about the query share volume as a key point, as a key starting point to understand what type of localization that market would particularly require. And these are some classic examples that I actually pulled up last night on some things that were done as a translation, but they did not take into account cultural nuances. You'd see the example of bibimbap, which essentially doesn't mean noodles, but they were advertised on noodles as Canada. Ramadan specific advertisement for Pringles included bacon flavored chips, and poor quality translations using a Swedish word that translates into rape or a sexual context. These are the ideas where you would know that sometimes literal translation is not the answer. It could lead to certain blunders. It could also lead to certain wall of shames, and some examples that we really want to quote because brands could have not done it right in the first place. And that's the messaging I want to take across, that these brands have really learned from their mistakes. They have been able to come across to understand the importance of localization, which is just not literal translation, but taking into account those cultural nuances. And this is what brings me to the key highlights when I talk about and think about localization. Just because a market speaks great English doesn't mean they want to. Create the brand voice, the style guide, the glossary to ensure the right tone and message. This becomes really important. As an example, black is considered a color of evil in Japan. So anything and everything you want to advertise around the color black should not be considered when you're trying to enter into a country like Japan. And the glossary should include all your specialized terms and phrases. We do understand that 100% localization sometimes is not completely acceptable. So what you do want to do is make sure for specific words or terms that you've been using in the regional language, you might want to add some form of glossary. And finally, ensure that you have a proofreader internally or a second vendor to ensure quality. I believe this is a manual. It's a mix of manual and automation tasks. So anybody and everybody can go wrong with translation at some point. As long as you're getting it proofread by another third party, it's really important that you make sure those tiny mistakes that might have been ignored in the first place are getting the attention they deserve. And that's particularly localization, but I'll deep dive more into what localization means in terms of customer experience, logistics, and payments. And let's talk about customer experience first. I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about customer experience is that if my customer experience is great, I get more sales. But if my customer experience is bad, and it only takes one bad experience for a customer to transition from being loyal to being disloyal. So you have to make sure that every single experience and touch point that you're offering to your customers from a customer experience lens is given the right attention, and you're making sure that there is a lot more attention to detail than you're already thinking about. Customer experience is the new marketing battlefront, 100%. As I said, it only takes one bad customer experience to transition a loyal customer into a disloyal customer. And why customer experience really matters, you would particularly notice that the implication is really high. 75 billion per year is lost across e-commerce companies due to bad customer experience. You would also notice that the challenge is very clear, that 55% of these online customers will abandon a purchase if they can't find an answer to a question. So you have to make sure that you're also keeping in line with those nuances of, are you able to answer your questions correctly? 67% of the customers actually become serial switchers because of one poor customer experience. And in the markets when brands are trying to build customer awareness and increase engagement, a poor customer experience can really be the make or break for you. So I've divided this part into two sections. Let's first focus on the self-serve support that a lot of brands and companies offer on their website, where I do not need to manually speak to someone to get my answer, but my self-serve support is the answer to most questions. And this is a little bit of a data-heavy slide, but I'll particularly focus on the right side, where you would see a stark difference in how countries use self-service portals in US as compared to the Asian markets. Let's take an example. Before purchase, if a question arises to the mind of a customer before they've even purchased, 56% of them would actually use a self-service portal in the United States. And 69% of them would use it as a mode of after purchase if they have questions about returns, if they have questions about their order being cancelled or their order not being delivered on time, for example. But what you'd particularly notice is that this number really goes up for your Asian markets. Think about Japan, think about South Korea, think about Hong Kong, Singapore. You'd see that the before purchase percentage of self-service portals is really high, which means when you're thinking about entering an Asian market, they perhaps prefer their answers to be on the website itself, and that they do not have to spend time manually speaking to someone about it, which is why it's really important to invest in a great self-service portal when it comes down to expanding into the Asian markets. And as you go towards the left side of the screen, you'd see that number slightly decreases when we talk about the European markets, the likes of Italy, Netherlands, and the Nordics. So have a think about how this expanse of various countries actually differ in which they use the online service portals. And globally, we would actually agree on the trend that self-service is on a rise, which is indicating that an organized, detailed, and an easy-to-use, effective system is basically what the customers are really looking at. Look at the example of United States again. You'd notice that before purchase has actually grown by 33%, while during purchase is now 55. Until last year, I was presenting the same slide which had the number 40 on it. So we know that it's really increased by 15 percentage points. And that's what we want to highlight here, that the self-serve, even in countries where it's slightly lesser than the Asian markets, it's actually on a huge rise. And what I was able to put together is creating effective self-help content. And believe me not, I actually went through so many help centers across various websites, including our own at Google, from our Google Help Center, to really identify what are the key things that I particularly love about brands when I try to think about, what are the 10 easy ways to find self-help content. And this data is validated by Euromonitor very easily. So firstly, you have to make sure that the data is very easy to find. So there is a dedicated section where people can look for these answers. You need to make sure that the simplicity is there, both in terms of navigation, but also in terms of the design, to make sure that the answers are available very quickly to the users. And moving on to the list, you would personally want to make sure that you are also able to personalize those FAQs based on the user journey or the anticipated topics, or what are the frequently most asked questions. So you place them on the top, and that's how you're also able to influence the behavior a little bit. And ultimately, I think the lesson learned is that you have to invest in self-help. It's going to be much more cost effective for you as an organization to invest in great self-help, because then you reduce the amount of effort being needed to invest in post help needed from a manual source. But you want to also make sure that you're able to track that user feedback through very simple one-line questions to ensure that you're getting those feedbacks and measuring the effectiveness over time of your self-help center and taking those changes and making those improvements that you really need. And then we move on to, okay, what about customer support channels? If you are already struggling with building out a strong self-help, or you think the self-help is not enough for a business like yours due to the complexity it comes with, then you try to want to think about what are the preferred customer support channels that customers experience in different markets. And I'll bring you back to a very similar type of a graph, but here you will notice a stark difference. Asian markets would particularly want to talk to a customer support staff, whether it's through chat, email, or telephone, before the purchase. So they want to make sure all their answers are absolutely clarified before the purchase itself. And that number is very less for Italian and Dutch markets or one of the Nordic markets. So you'd see the stark difference between Asian and European markets. On the other hand, European markets are very keen to talk to customer support after they've made the purchase. So whether it's about the product itself, whether it's about the quality, whether it's about giving feedback, they are very much proactive in making sure that they are passing on that information after the purchase is being done and after they've had some form of experience in using the product. And that's the real difference. If I'm a business and I'm thinking about moving into an Asian market, I want to make sure my staff is fully trained on people who want to talk to customers before the purchase is made, and they're also giving them the right answers and the directions to actually give them a personalized experience so that the purchase actually happens. And on the other hand, Italian and more European markets would be more focused on the after purchase part of it, which means they want to more focus on driving loyalty. So a one-time purchaser can become a loyal customer if they're given excellent after purchase services. And if I particularly break down into the forms, you'd notice that the 5 most common forms that Euromonitor has discovered with us for key channels to contact customer service range from call, email, in-person, contact form, and live chat. And again, you'd notice a very stark difference across these countries. You'd notice that US and UK particularly are high on the calling side of things, versus Germany, you'd notice, is particularly in between in-person contacting and using a contact form, while Japanese customers are heavily inclined towards using a contact form. So you'd notice that these nuances become really important to give that localized customer experience to a user when they're entering different forms of markets. And believe me not, there's even a stark difference that you'd notice between the likes of Netherlands and Belgium, which are countries very close by and have a lot of similarities. But you'd notice that a lot of overlap may not just mean that everything can be blanket extended to a different country. So make sure that for that particular country, you're able to deep dive into these metrics to realize how much of an operational setup you would need and what would be a best practice looking like. A really classic example of something Google supported the H&M team a couple of years ago is building out a chatbot, which is essentially a virtual assistant. So chatbots can represent the evolution of online self-service portals for luxury companies, specifically by going directly to the consumer and providing the necessary information. And you'd notice that these chatbots have become really common amongst e-commerce businesses, where a very relevant virtual assistant is directing you to the right self-help support. And if the self-help support is not enough, they will direct you to a live person to make the communication with. And that brings me to the end of my section on customer experience, to make sure that you're having it in a very robust manner, making sure it's localized for the country that you're entering into, and also doing a great combination of self-help and other models of support for customer experience. Which brings me to my next segment, which is about global payments. And global payments becomes really interesting because you'd know that this is the opportunity which you're looking at. $118 billion of revenue missed by merchants, specifically in the US as an example, due to unnecessary declines. 67% of the online shoppers abandon carts because the site does not support their local payment methods. And this becomes really important. On an average, an international merchant usually tries to provide about 2 payment providers to cover all the markets and payment methods. And you'd particularly notice, if you're a brand who works with multiple payment providers, is that each provider has its own unique value proposition, which you should be evaluating before you integrate it with your business itself. So payments is a very important landscape because that's the last part of the funnel where you don't want to go wrong at all. That's where the user has gotten onto the website, spent time reading up on your self-support, spent time on deciding which products they want to buy, and they are at that point where they're almost about to make a purchase. And sometimes if the payment methods are not localized for the market, that's what leads to the highest cart abandonment rate for your business. So do have a think about, if you're doing well in one market but you're not doing well in the second market, this could be an area of improvement, because this is where users might be dropping off more than you were expecting them to, due to not having a localized payment offering. And I'm particularly going to take examples of two countries here and compare US with Germany in terms of what type of payment methods these countries prefer and what's on a rise. Particularly for US, what you'd notice is that cards is the most common factor of payment. The country is very, very card centric, both credit and debit card. E-wallets are becoming more and more important, PayPal and Apple Pay being the two most important e-wallet services, and they're both on a rise. There's a lot more increase about security concerns. So people, before making a purchase, want to make sure it's happening in a safe portal, want to particularly check that HTTPS on the top to make sure that the security concerns are being taken care of. And they also want to upfront know about any shipping costs or any additional costs or any discounts that they might be missing out on. So US customers become very price-led right when it comes down to making that final purchase. And you want to make sure that you're integrating all of that information within the website for a US customer. And I think one common trend which is happening a lot more in Europe, and I've seen a lot of it happening specifically with Klarna as a brand, is the buy now, pay later option. So easy financing is what a lot of customers look for, specifically in luxury items or specifically in high ticket items. So you want to make sure that if you're a brand who's offering high ticket items or an average order basket size of more than $100, you want to ensure that you're also offering them the buy now, pay later option for a US customer. On the other hand, if we look at Germany as an example, which is a completely different country altogether, the trends slightly change. You would notice that bank transfer is actually the most important part of their transaction methods. It's not the card, it's actually only 27%. But bank transfer incorporates 70% of German customers' behavior. 95% of the relevant population has a bank account and prefer online bank transfer over any other method of transaction. And in e-wallet, you'd particularly notice that Apple Pay is not that famous. So it's actually PayPal and Amazon Pay, which are more important in the e-wallet world for Germany, and buy now, pay later trends much faster and much higher in the German market as compared to the US market. You'd also notice, this is particularly not present in the slide, but one action that we particularly noticed, that the average order value of a German customer when they are purchasing on a retail website is much higher than a US value customer. And then the second trend that we also notice is that the return percentages of a German customer are much higher than a US customer. I'm going to cover more of this in the logistics part, but just giving you a nuance of how customer behavior can sometimes be so different. German customers want to order multiple sizes of the same thing to identify what size works the best for them and then return the rest later. Versus US customers are very particular about just ordering the size that they really want, doing heavy research on the size that could be a potential good fit if they're not aware of it completely, but they do not offer multiple items, and the return percentages are slightly lesser than what you would see in the German market. Coming down to some interesting payment best practices that we've particularly noticed and advised brands on, and these recommendations have really helped in improving the cart abandonment rate of these brands. Firstly, it's really important to have the logos on your payment page, the logos of the brands or the methods of payment that you're really offering, because this gives them a quick overview of the accepted forms of payment, and it also creates a familiar look which is used to prompt the sensitive information. You also want to make sure that the loading time is not too high. You want to make sure that the look and feel is slightly different and a different URL. So we know if there's a redirect happening, we know where it's happening, we know it's secure. And security concerns, which I'm going to delve into now, are also something that could depend per market. Some countries are more conscious about security of their payments versus some countries are lesser. And the second best payment method of practice that I've particularly noticed is that you want to give them an autofill enablement so that it's easy for them to not input their card information completely every single time. You also want to make sure that it's correctly aligned to how card companies usually have spaces after every 4 digits, and there is there is correction there. You also want to give them the option to save the cart for later, because that really reduces the time in making the purchase the next time a customer comes back to your website and has a signed in login account. And payment elements that affect conversions, these are the three that particularly stand out, that you want to, of course, give them the preferred form of payments and you want to make it easy and fast. But the most important one on the center is you want to provide them a secure checkout, because an insecure checkout not just means that they are going to never shop from you again. It also means that it's a hassle for the customer to go back to their bank and do some chargebacks, which could be not so great customer experience. So I'll always tie back to payment localization, back to customer experience localization, back to how we think about localization to be a lot more than translations. And all of this really ties back to, if you're entering a new market, how can you be more profitable? You can be more profitable by having an edge over your competitors through these areas of operations which are making you more cost effective, which are making you more efficient, and which are making you more wanted in the customer market, which is anyway so confusing and a messy middle, just like Jonas talked about. And this is a graph which particularly talks about the secure experience that you want to give to your users. And of course, Visa and MasterCard are the most familiar brand and they win by a very significant margin. PayPal verification is actually becoming more and more trusted. And a lot of European brands actually stick to the McAfee secured or the Norton secured customer experience from a payment standpoint. So you want to make sure that you're evaluating the importance of these security badges and integrating them into your website as early in the customer journey as possible. So maybe even before they reach the customer payment page, to ensure that they are already knowing from the beginning that this website is going to be safe for making my transactions. Again, as I mentioned, seals of approval raise trust for 74% of the users on mobile. So it becomes even more important when a user is trying to navigate everything through a mobile device, where sometimes it's more prone to making errors. So two things that really work for mobile specific customers is definitely the seal of approval through a security badge. And secondly, the autofill enablement, because they want to save time and it's sometimes a hassle when they are on the go and shopping. They do not want to take out their debit or credit card, or they may not have one at the moment. So you want to make sure the autofill option is always available for them. So key highlights on the payments front. You have to make sure you keep your checkout short and simple. Otherwise, you lose, risking 28% of the customers. And you want to make sure that customers feel safe and secure. So you want to try different calls to actions and maybe do some form of A/B testing to know what works better in what market. Seals of approval raise trust by 74%, and you want to make sure that you're processing locally to avoid cross-border declines, because declines are not the most pleasant thing as a consumer that I would want, and sometimes it leads to a lot of hassle with the bank itself, easy switches to a different brand that accepts it, or sometimes I just abandon the cart and never come back to it because I know that a cross-border decline is bound to happen. With this, I come to the last part of the operational journey, which is logistics. Now, international logistics is really, really important, because then you also want to think about, okay, once the payment is made, what is my delivery method that I'm offering to the customer? What is my return method that I'm offering to the customer? How easy or difficult am I making it for the customer to buy the product, but also to return the product? How quickly am I able to give the product? Do I have express shipping? Do I have standard shipping? So a lot of questions come to people's mind when we think about logistics as one of the operational levers. And particularly what you'd notice is that this is the bottom line. Getting delivery right means happier customers, means more sales. And that's the bottom line, that if you have the delivery right, you know customers are going to do repeat transactions. You know their average order value is going to be higher because they would trust your brand to get the delivery in a safe and sound manner to your doorstep. 5 best practices that we've particularly noticed, regardless of the country that you're in, is you want to offer both standard and expedited delivery option, because customers could differ based on the country they are available in or the base of the country that they're shopping from. Free shipping option should always be included, even if it means a longer delivery period time. You want to make sure that that's an option. Alternative delivery options should be available. By alternative delivery options, I certainly mean that if they do not want delivery at their doorstep, they might want to do a click and collect option, which is a very common option. Specifically, you'd notice in the countries of UK and Ireland. So that is really important. Ensuring that customers can track progress of their orders. So of course, tracking is extremely important. As a customer, I would at all times want to know where my order has reached, when it's going to reach me, and any tracking availability also makes sure that I keep somebody available at home or at the doorstep to take the delivery. And finally, easy return process and ideally free returns is something that's important. A very common question I get from a lot of clients is that, it's easier said than done to talk about easy returns and give easy returns, or it's easier said than done to give them expedited delivery. That doesn't make my business profitable. I completely agree. These are basic best practices that you want to follow. However, you want to do a great trade-off with your own profitability to analyze which of these 5 you really can integrate in your business early on and which of these would you integrate at a later stage. So do keep in mind that, of course, all the recommendations here may not be 100% profitable. So it does depend on the maturity or the journey of internationalization that you're in to identify what trade-off are you ready to take. Are you ready to not break even, but you want to give the exceptional delivery service because it's going to help you in the long term? Or you want to first start thinking about profitability and then think about expanding into various avenues of logistics. Classic example, I'd particularly give you an example of how the Canadian customers behave very differently to the UK and Irish customers, who behave very differently to the Australian customers. Let's take the example of delivery lead time. Canadian customers are happily willing to wait for 5 to 8 days, versus you'd notice that the Irish and UK customers are comfortable with the 3 to 5 day standard delivery. So you want to make sure that you're setting up those delivery times, of course, depending on where your warehouse is, but also making sure you're communicating it well on the website. Another classic difference that I particularly notice is that Canadian customers would want an estimated delivery date to be visible at the checkout itself, so they know when it's going to come in, versus UK and Ireland customers are slightly more flexible there because they also want to use click and collect as an alternative option, which is widely chosen for convenience. So if they know they're not going to be home, there's nobody who's going to be ready to take the deliveries are not safe within the residential apartment, you want to make sure that the click and collect alternative delivery option is definitely available to customers in UK and Ireland. And the last part, which is easy returns, you'd notice that in Canada, 4 out of 10 customers abandon the carts if return shipping is not free, versus in UK and Ireland, customers do understand that it's not always free shipping or free returns, but what they do expect is that the retailers should be bearing the bill for the returns. So instead of us bearing the bill for the returns, the retailers should at least contribute to a significant part of it. And that's the significant difference we see in different markets. And of course, we have a full map of each country doing it this way. So if you're interested in identifying which type of payment behaviors and which type of logistics behaviors these countries are expecting, I think Market Finder is one of our Google tools that's definitely a first great starting point to identify what the country really looks for, what are the nuances that you want to be mindful of when you're trying to expand in that continent, and also align your capabilities to them to make sure you're still profitable in the market. And when it comes down to what do customers prioritize, of course, now logistics is a huge segment. It involves a lot of things, but what you particularly would notice is that Australian customers are okay to wait for 6 to 7 days for their deliveries to come. That's top for them, that they want deliveries from US and they're okay to wait for a long time. Versus in UK and Ireland, click and collect is the most important thing that customers are now looking for when they try to shop. And in Canada, you would think about free returns. So if free returns are not offered, cart abandonment rate becomes really high, and it's more than 40%. So these are various things that countries and customers in these countries would prefer when it comes to logistics, and they may not look very similar in each market. So you want to make sure what is the customer in that market really prioritizing, that I want to make my first priority, and then decide on what trade-off I'm looking at. Again, giving you a classic example and comparison of an American customer with a German customer. In general, e-commerce, the leading factor to influence whether an American customer will purchase from an online shop or not is free shipping is offered. So 63% of them definitely look at free shipping, and 60% look at security and privacy policies. And that becomes really important. versus if we look at the German customer, we would notice that 72% of them actually offer free shipping options, and 56% have the ability to select a convenient delivery location, which could be the store itself, which could be a different location, which could be a warehouse or whatever. So you notice the stark differences in these markets, not just when it comes down to customer experience and payments, but also logistic methods on both delivery preferences and product returns. And that essentially brings me to deep dive a little more on specifically Germany as a country, as an example. These are the highlights that you would particularly notice across the various retailers and logistic partners that we work with, and what the German customers most preferably want to work with. Go Express Logistics is actually the more important one because their services also include weekend and holiday services, same-day transport for urgent shipments, and the most common industries that use Go Express Logistics by default is the medical industry, but also high-tech, automotive, and fashion and lifestyle. Followed by DHL, which I think is common in a lot of markets, but they actually capture 49% of the parcel market share. And they have flexible delivery services and 28,000 locations nationwide. So just by the virtue that DHL is so global, it becomes one of the most preferred logistic provider for a lot of countries, even outside of Germany. And I'd leave this information with you to read through all the other options that are available, from DPD to GLS to Hermes, to really identify what are these logistic partners in Germany. If you wish to deep dive into any other country, Market Finder is going to be a great starting point to actually look at what are the preferred top 3 logistic partners in each of the countries that you're interested in expanding into. And with this, I've particularly also looped in a roadmap of 6 months, considering logistics is, out of all the 4 operational areas, a slightly trickier one because it does involve an external partner, which could be sometimes difficult to get, sometimes more expensive than you expected. So in terms of a 6-month strategy on how you want to think about logistics, firstly, you want to definitely know your customer and determine the delivery offerings that you have and create that soft balance between the two. Secondly, you want to set the strategy right, doing the assortment, doing the ROI, and deciding which fulfillment strategy would help you with your long-term business growth. Then you finalize the details in terms of managing returns, delivery preferences, and your income model. And finally, you select the logistics partner out of the range of partners that usually provide services in that country. Sometimes it's also great to have 2 logistics partners to have a backup. And at the end of 6 months, what we do expect from customers who are building their delivery and logistics offering is to have a clear delivery offering, making that growth strategy according to the market that you're in, defining the customs and duty calculations for export markets right during the checkout to not mislead customers in any form, and have that RFP in process with your suppliers. And this sometimes process could take a little less or more than 6 months, depending on the type of business and the complexity that you operate in. But I'd say the high level roadmap is really very beneficial in laying down those 6 steps that you need during the course of 6 months to make sure that you are giving the best delivery service to your customers, because this is a very important part of the after purchase service. So you want to make sure that once the purchase is made, you're delivering the products in the most safe, sound, quick, easy, and fast manner to your customers. So key highlights from a logistics perspective: offer free standard shipping and premium expedited wherever possible. Clearly communicate your delivery and return policies across the website, because that's really important. And different markets have different expectations. So make peace with it and make sure that you're also trying to innovate around those different markets, and tracking to ensure there are a variety of options and the users can track their packages for delivery is equally important to make sure you're giving that operational excellence to your customers. And with this, we almost come towards the end of the session, and I'm sure a lot of you might have questions. We'll open it up for questions. And I know there were a few questions that Jonas and I would love to answer for you, and we already have some of them that have come in for a couple of things. Jonas, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, and you and I, Rashida, we have done a couple of boot camps together with our current customers, and I think it's always really good exercise and be really concrete to do this for the actual what it actually looks like for our customers. But what would you say is the most appreciated part of the boot camps?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give broader context to everyone on the call who hasn't been a part of the Google Keywordio Bootcamp in the past, is essentially spending a day with our global operations insight from a Google expert. This is an amazing offering that we offer to our clients in the agency program, and it's super beneficial for showing them how the operational efficiencies play such a key role. What I definitely love about this bootcamp is that you definitely see the path to purchase analysis for two key markets that you're particularly interested in, but we then tie it back to the key industry insights from your particular industry and match it to some competitor insights to make sure that you're also benchmarking yourself against those competitors and becoming best in class when it comes down to operations. And I think the best part about bootcamps is that when we bring in 4 or 5 brands from your agency together, it's a great opportunity to learn from other brands. I particularly find that very exciting for myself, that brands are open to sharing with each other their learnings, their mistakes, and supporting each other in this journey throughout. So I'd say it's a very unique service offering that we have as a part of the International Growth Agency program. So if you do work with Keywordio, I would definitely encourage you to start talking to them about a potential bootcamp in the near future where a Google expert is going to be supporting you on global operations throughout the year.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, it's really actionable. It's combined both knowledge sharing and also one-to-one sessions. So reach out to your contact at Keywordio to get more information about how those boot camps are run. With that, I think we can go into some bonus content and the next steps for everyone as well. So we can look at the next slide as well. So like you mentioned, Rashida, the next step, first just do a quick look into Market Finder. It's great to get some like early insights and adjustments based on what you have. And the natural next step will be to schedule a call with us to see where you are in the journey. Are you mature for a boot camp? Is it a growth workshop, or what is really needed, and what is the next step? Anything else you would like to point out on the Market Finder?
Yes, absolutely. For those of you who have not used Market Finder, it's a free tool from Google. It's the best tool I've come across to identify your new markets. It gives you a combination of a lot of data around ease of doing business in a certain market, the competitiveness, and also ties it back to some ad-related metrics. So you're benchmarking around CPCs and CTRs in that particular market if you're thinking about it from an ads perspective. And it is also a tool where you can find everything about the operations on a certain country and also reach out to certain partners through the website itself. So for example, if you're interested in a payment partner, you can simply go into your website through the Market Finder, sign up, look into the payment options, and directly contact the payment provider from the Market Finder website. The last thing, a lot of pool of great case studies. Market Finder is our one-stop shop to actually see how other brands are leveraging the international growth strategies and how you can learn from them, steal with pride, and also make sure that one day you become one of the part of the Market Finder family for an external case study of your own.
Yes. And then we have the final bonus for everyone who joined. So let's look at the last slide.
Yes, please. This is the most exciting part.
Exactly. So this is one of our amazing customers, Proteinbolaget. We've been working with them since they were around 50 million in annual revenue. And now they are way over 130 million in annual revenue. And we have a unique offer on their latest GAM energy drink. So you can get ett helt flak for you in Swedish, but 24x of GAM for $2.99 with this discount code. So now it's raining in Stockholm, so I think everybody could use a little summer feeling here. So use that, and I'm sure you will love the latest. And I think this is also a great example of a company where we have done this growth workshops and globalization, really finding what's the next market, what's the potential, and put the focusing on that when it comes to launching new markets. It's also a complex assortment, so there's a lot of analysis done together with the amazing team at Proteinbolaget. And on that note, on the team, they are also, I know there's a lot of marketeers also joining in on these calls. So if there's somebody who's looking for an interesting next job within marketing, you can also ping me on LinkedIn, and I will help you with a connection to the right people as well at Proteinbolaget, because they're always looking for talent within the e-commerce space as well. And big thanks for Ruchita to take the time. I know you're really busy, so thank you very much for taking the time and sharing all the knowledge with us today.
Absolutely, it was such a delight, and I hope you all found it useful. Jonas and my contact details are on one of the slides, which I'm just going to find now. But do reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions. I would really strongly encourage you to think about working with Keywordio as one of the key partners. We and Jonas and I have a strong relationship as a part of the International Growth Agency program, and we want to make sure that all these exciting offerings from Google's side and from Keywordio's side are reaching to you as one great package to help you with your global expansion.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.